Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome back to Cinematic Reviews. As always, I will be your host, Chris, and this is a show about all things movies and TV. We travel through the MCU once again with Phase 2. We're going to Asgard once more to talk about Thor, The Dark World, the second Thor movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Before that, we'll talk about Stranger Things 5, Volume 2. I'll give my review of those 3 episodes that dropped on Christmas Day. Then we'll finish everything off, like we always do on the show, with the ranking segment for Thor, The Dark World. Before we get into all that, though, a couple of reminders. You can watch the show every week at youtube.com/the Cinematic Reviews. Now you can watch the video version on Spotify as well. That's right. You can check out the video version on Spotify. You can also check out the audio version on your favorite podcast listening service. Check out the Facebook page, X page, and Instagram page as well. I post all the artwork from each and every episode, along with other breaking news like the Brainiac casting announcement I posted on that one, as well as the current box office numbers for Avatar, Fire, and Ash. That episode will be coming out in the next couple of days. That'll be the final episode of 2025. We'll kick off 2026 with the first annual Cinematic Awards. This is where we go through the whole calendar of movies and shows that have come out in 2025 and give them some awards. This will include the best film and best series of 2025, along with many other categories that I've been working on. It's going to be a lot of fun handing out all those rewards from 2025 and just kind of look back at all the different projects that have come out both in theaters and on streaming. It's going to be a lot of fun. So with that, let's head over to news and reactions for the review for Stranger Things 5 Volume 2. Volume 2 of Stranger Things 5 premiered on Netflix on Christmas Day. Netflix gave us 3 more episodes, and then we'll get the finale episode on New Year's Eve next week. The 3 episodes that we got for Volume 2 are Episode 5, Shock and Jock, Episode 6, Escape from Kamazot, and Episode 7, The Bridge, which was an awesome episode to leave us hanging on. And then Episode 8, which will be the finale, is The Right Side Up. This will not only be the finale of Season 5, but it'll be the finale of the entire series. So very, very excited to see what the Duffer Brothers have in store for us on ending this long-awaited story to reach its conclusion on Netflix. But focusing on Volume 2, I was very, very excited for this. Now, as you may know, I'm a huge football fan as well. I have a football podcast that I do on top of this one. And so having it come out on Christmas Day was a bit of a conundrum for me. You know, we had some football at the exact same time this was airing on Netflix. My Denver Broncos were playing the Kansas City Chiefs at 7 p.m. my time, which is the exact same time that Stranger Things premiered. So I had to kind of find the middle ground there. I watched the first half of the Bronco game, and then I dived right into the Stranger Things 5 Volume 2 with my sister. We've been watching this season together as these 3 sections have come out, and we are going to watch the finale together as well. The finale will be 2 hours. I believe it clocks in at 2 hours and 5 minutes to be exact. So it's going to be pretty much a full-length movie to end this series. And then the episode 5, 6, and 7, they were about an hour and 40-ish minutes apiece. I'll go through the exact number of time that it was allotted for as we go through these episodes. So episode 5, Shock and Jock, this is kind of catching us up to where we were. Volume 1 ended with that big reveal with Will discovering that he can tap into the hive mind and basically had the same powers as 11 as well as 8. 8 was revealed to be coming back as well towards the end of Volume 1. But these 3 episodes in Volume 2 were basically really Will focused. He was a bit confused, but also he kind of knew that he could possibly tap into these powers to begin with. But the end of Volume 1 pretty much confirmed his theory that he could somehow tap into the hive mind and kind of control the Demogorgons. And then now, as these 3 episodes go on, he starts to come up with this plan of maybe being able to tap into Vecna's mind and controlling him and possibly destroying him from within, like he was able to do with the Demogorgons at the end of episode 4. Episode 4, the way that ended, was one of the best episodes, not just the series of Stranger Things, but in like TV in general. And then now these episode 5 kicking off, it really picks up that momentum. They're coming up with this plan to take on Vecna, how to destroy him, how to save Holly and all the other kids. Eventually it gets revealed that Vecna needs these 12 kids in order to basically reshape the world in his image, kind of ergo like godlike. And he needs these 12 kids, including Derek, who has become a huge fan favorite character, and Holly Wheeler as well. They are 2 of the 12 that they're needed, but Vecna also needs Will as well. He ends up turning Will into a spy once again, against Will's better judgment. And it's kind of balls to the walls, so to speak, from start to finish in this volume 2. Now, the reviews I've seen so far about volume 2 is it's a lot of dragging on, a lot of dialogue, a lot of building up. Well, that's kind of how shows like this start. You know, you kind of get caught up with volume 1, you're left on a huge cliffhanger, and then you get into the middle of the story where it's a lot of dialogue, it's a lot of setting up things for the finale. But this is still a really entertaining volume 2, and I don't understand some of the backlash or poor reactions to this volume 2. These are 3 very important episodes that will lead into the finale, and I think the Duffer Brothers are going to give us one of the best, if not the best, finales to a show ever put on TV. And I'm super excited for that episode. But focusing on these 3, though, I think they're really, really good episodes still. Now, is it better than volume 1? I think as of right now, I really, really enjoyed that volume 1 slightly more than volume 2, but that doesn't take away anything from volume 2. It's still really, really good content. It's a really good second part to this long story that we've been waiting to get from the Duffer Brothers, and to kind of conclude this entire Stranger Things story that started off in episode 1 back in the day. But these episodes are still really fantastic. You get to catch up with Holly and Max as they're going through this sort of makeshift prison that Vecna kind of created to hold these 12 kids hostage. And that's really the big kind of plot or storyline that's going with episode 6, with Escape from Kamazatz, which is the place that they're held in, inside Vecna's mind. And they start to form this plan to escape Vecna's mind and to rejoin the group so that they can take down Vecna from the outside. You also get more of Dipshit Derek, as he's been renamed. He's such a lovable character. You can tell that he's conflicted because, you know, he too has a family on the outside, and Vecna does threaten to kill his family if he doesn't kind of follow him, even though Derek knows that Vecna is no good and he is lying through his teeth. Every time Vecna kind of shared his plan with the 12 kids, you're kind of rolling your eyes and like, yeah, sure, right. You know, that's such a bunch of bullshit that you're feeding these kids. But at the end of the day, they're kids, and that's why he targeted them. They're the weakest. Their minds are easily manipulated and reshaped in the way that he wants them to. So he has become this sort of godlike cult figure where he basically comes up with this story of good versus evil, dark versus light, and he's convincing these 12 kids to join his army, so to speak, to battle the darkness. But in reality, he's the darkness, he's the villain that our group of heroes, 11, Mike, Lucas, all of them are starting to fight him. So it's really unfortunate that these 12 kids are so innocent and so manipulated because of their age and their naivete and the way that their minds work. They're easily manipulated to become a part of something because they're kind of outcast, so to speak. They're the weak-minded. They're very different than the other kids in their class, and that's why Vecna chose them, because they were outsiders, because they want that sense of purpose, that belonging. They want to be the hero of their own story. So this is where he takes advantage of that and makeshifts this story within his mind for these 12 kids to become heroes and to help him save the world. And it's such a bunch of bullshit when he's in that room talking to these kids, and you're just like screaming at the TV like, Derek and Holly, tell them the truth that Vecna, or Mr. Whatsit as he is referred to from the kids, that he is such a liar and he is the villain of the story. But like I said, Derek gets caught between a rock and a hard place because Vecna threatened his family and he wants to protect his family, so he has to go along with this. But the back of his mind, you could tell that he's hoping that, Nancy and Eleven and Dustin and Mike and Lucas and Will, that they can save them from Vecna's mind and he can go see his family again. And it's really unfortunate. And then the bridge episode, this is where we really get into what Vecna's like end game is here, to kind of tie in the Marvel episode today. And that's where it gets revealed from Dustin exploring Hawkins' lab. That was really cool that we could go back there and kind of see everything in the Upside Down, kind of going back to season 1 and season 2 to kind of reminisce on Hawkins' lab. And he stumbles across his office with all these notes and these diagrams and these paperworks, and it's revealed that Hawkins' lab created this sort of wormhole that connects Earth and this other dimension or other universe, and the Upside Down is actually this wormhole. Like, the Upside Down isn't the other dimension or the other universe, it's actually just a bridge. And that was a really cool reveal, that the Upside Down ends up being this bridge. And so they must stop Vecna from bringing that other universe into Earth and then having them collide and reshaped in the world that he wants. And so they come up with this plan at the end of the volume 2 to kind of wait for Vecna to get to a certain point of I guess we can kind of tie in Thor: The Dark World, since we're talking about today. Wait for that point of the convergence, so to speak, where that universe and Earth kind of combine together. So they have to wait for this certain point so they can climb up the radio station tower and jump into that other universe and stop Vecna from there. And that's kind of where we get this idea of the bridge, where Dustin, draws this diagram and it looks like a cylinder shape, and it's really cool how they reveal that the Upside Down is just this bridge. It's not like the other world that Vecna is trying to turn Earth into. It's just a bridge between the two worlds. And Vecna actually wants to bring this universe in where we see him. That's where he keeps the 12 kids and those little cocoon things with the tentacles sucking out their life force or whatever it is and feeding it into him. And that's how he's able to be stronger and more of a threat to our group of heroes. And this volume 2 is fantastic. I absolutely love it. We have that big moment with Will revealing that he is gay and that he has been in love with, well, he doesn't come out and say he's been in love with Mike, but I think the audience pretty much knows since season, 4, that he was in love with Mike this whole time. And so we get that kind of coming out of the closet, so to speak, moment in episode 7, where a lot of fans are ripping that to pieces on how that kind of played out and the reactions to Mike and different characters in that group. But I think it was a great moment for Will. He's always felt different. He's always felt kind of on the outside of the group, even though he's probably the one that cares about the group the most. And he was afraid that they would look at him differently. And don't want to speak for, all the other, gays and all that out there, but I'm sure that's how they felt as well, before they were able to kind of explain to their families and friends and the world that this is how they are. And it was a really well acted and well performed scene. Noah, who plays Will in the series, he did a fantastic job. And Will has become one of my favorite characters since the starting of this season. He's been fantastic. I mean, this is his story, and I think it's going to end up coming down to him and Vecna fighting each other. And I wouldn't be surprised if Will ends up, having to make that ultimate sacrifice and dying in order to protect the world and protect his family and friends. Same thing with 11. My sister and I have been theorizing together, and we think that it could get to the point where Will and 11 have to go inside Vecna's mind together in order to defeat him because he's so powerful and strong. And that brings up another scene that I wanted to kind of just briefly break down a little bit, and that's that scene where Max and Holly are cornered by Henry when they're trying to escape that first time, and Will is able to tap into Vecna's mind because they, Frankenstein that Demogorgon on the top of the radio tower in order for him to tap into the hive mind, which was a really cool idea. And he ends up getting into Vecna's mind. We get that really awesome moment where he's not only controlling Vecna's body, but he's controlling his vocals, and he's speaking through Vecna, where he goes, "Run, Max, run." And it's really cool where he's able to break his leg. He's trying to twist Vecna's neck in order to kill him. But Vecna is so powerful that he ends up expelling Will out of him. And that's kind of where that theory started to form with my sister and I as we watched this, where him and 11 are going to have to go inside of that mind together and take him down as a team. And it's going to be a really awesome moment, I think, when we get to episode 8. Now, number 8, the other sister to 11 that comes back at the end of Volume 1, I think she's up to no good. I think she is not to be trusted, and I think she will betray 11 and the rest of the groups. That's kind of my prediction of her. She seems to be having her own agenda or her own mission, and I think she is going to end up joining Henry or trying to join Henry. So we'll get this Will and 11 versus 8 and Vecna kind of super battle at the end of it, somewhere at some point in episode 8 on the finale. So just a couple predictions I have kind of going through my mind as we're watching Volume 2. But I absolutely love Volume 2. I give it 5 popcorn buckets, which is fantastic. I think I give Volume 1 5 popcorn buckets as well. And I'm super excited to give that finale a popcorn scale as well. Like I said, that'll premiere on New Year's Eve. So the series will be over. That'll be 2 hours and 5 minutes. Episode 5 was an hour and 43 minutes. Episode 6 was an hour and 41 minutes. And then episode 7 was almost 2 hours. That was at 1 hour and 58 minutes. So we've already gotten a little taste of that 2 hour story with episode 7. Plus we got it with season 4 back when that came out. That was in blocks of like 2 hours anyways. So we're already kind of used to this. And if you're a Marvel fan or Lord of the Rings fans, you know what 2 hours and 3 hours, we had a almost 4 hour Endgame movie. So this is kind of just how streaming is now. These are little mini movies with this season of Stranger Things, and I really like it. It's really, really awesome. So we will also, on the schedule for 2026, we will be reviewing each of the 5 seasons as well. So I've been giving these little reviews on top of other episodes of the show, but next year, and this will probably be the first season of 2026 where we have a Stranger Things season, we'll actually break down season 5 like we've done before with series. But we're going to start with season 1, go into 2, 3, 4, and then we'll come back to season 5. And as we watch all 5 seasons together on the show, similar to what we're doing with the Marvel Fridays, we'll do the same thing with Stranger Things. That'll be a separate project on top of Marvel Friday. So super excited to start from the very beginning and finally cover Stranger Things on the show. But season 5 currently streaming on Netflix. Volumes 1 and 2 are out now. Volume 3, or the finale, whatever you want to call it, is coming out on New Year's Eve, probably around that 7 o'clock time frame, I would imagine. And that'll be 2 hours to conclude not only season 5, but the entire series as well. So check out Stranger Things on Netflix today. Well, let's take a little break, and then we'll head into our feature film of the day, Thor: The Dark World.
Some believe that before the universe, there was nothing. They're wrong. There was darkness. And it has survived.
I gave you my word. I would return.
What's gonna happen?
Hold on.
Wait, what? Jane! We're from different worlds. Maybe they're separate for a reason.
If we do nothing, they'll destroy us.
Ask yourself, what will you sacrifice for what you believe?
You must be truly desperate to come to me for help.
You should know that when you betray me, I will kill you.
When do we start?
So Thor: The Dark World is one of the lower rated movies on the MCU scale. It's not the worst movie we've gotten in the MCU, but it's definitely top 5, top 10. I don't want to step on rankings too much, but I will pull up that ranking here just so I can give kind of a general idea of where it's at. Out of 52 films, it's towards the bottom for sure. Well, 52 projects altogether. Most of those are the movies, though. Let me pull this up here. So it's definitely in the bottom 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Probably, yeah, it's definitely in the bottom 10, bottom 5 for sure of the MCU. But there's still some pieces of this movie that I enjoy. We'll kind of talk that through as we go through the episode today, but it's not the worst movie in the world, but it's definitely one of the worst ones in this Marvel Cinematic Universe. And there's a lot of things to credit it for being one of the worst, and most of it is because of the studio involvement, the different directors that were attached to this, the story, the cramming or the building up of this Infinity Saga with the stones and Thanos and all that. It kind of got Iron Man 2'd a little bit, where Marvel really wanted to shove as much crap into here for future films and not focus on the project itself, which I think is what they eventually learned at a couple of points throughout the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where they just, this early stages of the MCU, they really didn't know what they had at the time. They were still kind of designing the MCU and how they wanted it, and they just didn't quite execute it all the time. When we get to next week's episode, which I'm super excited about, The Winter Soldier, that really feels like a more smaller contained story. Same thing with Iron Man 3. While that one's pretty cool, it doesn't really reference Infinity Stones or anything like that. This is what kind of where they're like, oh, Iron Man 3 didn't really tap into this overarching story that we wanted, so we need to cram that into here instead of just kind of slowly building it. Eventually they learn to utilize those post-credit scenes and save that for there and focus on the main story, and then just tie that main story into the post-credit scene. That is the overarching story, if that makes sense. But this is just kind of a result of the early stages of the MCU, where Disney Marvel just didn't really know how they wanted to shape this universe quite yet. But there's still parts of this movie that are very entertaining, and when we get through the iconic scenes, I'll talk those through. But I had quite a difficult time coming up with those iconic scenes, because there's just not a whole lot to be excited about, or things. You really just think of the bad things in here, but I wanted to keep the iconic scenes a little more exciting and more better. I wanted to pick the good scenes out. I didn't want to just focus on the bad so much. Otherwise, this is just going to be a bummed out, boring episode today. I want to extract as much good stuff out of this movie, because there is some good stuff in here. I still enjoy watching this movie because it's a Marvel movie, because it's Chris Hemsworth as Thor, who is perfect casting. I can't imagine anybody else being Thor at this point. And even though this is at the very bottom of the MCU as far as quality, it's still got some entertaining aspects of it, especially the Loki Thor relationship. They really, this is this movie walked so that Thor Ragnarok could run, if that makes sense. I don't think we would have gotten Ragnarok if we didn't get Thor: The Dark World to kind of set up this comedic and brotherly, what's the best term, brother competition that we would have gotten in Ragnarok if we didn't get it kind of setting up in here. And it's really, really good. Tom Hiddleston's freaking hilarious in here, and they kind of just let him loose, which is great. He's cracking jokes. He's really mischievous and really backstabbing, but he is kind of a highlight of this movie once again, just like he was in the first movie and the Avengers movie before this. So it's really interesting to think that I'm stepping on fun facts a little bit, but he actually wasn't supposed to be in this movie. They kind of wrote him out because we had his story kind of end with the Thor movie. Then we brought him back for the Avengers movie, and then they kind of dealt with him there. So they kind of felt that he was kind of overused at this point. But with the popularity that he received from audiences as the main villain in the Avengers movie, they're like, okay, we got to bring it back. We got to bring Tom Hiddleston back. So this would have been a very different movie if he did not return for this. But before we get into like a deeper dive of the cast and everything, let's kind of go through the release date and the box office stuff for this. So Thor: The Dark World released on, let me pull up the date here, November 8th, 2013. I saw this opening weekend like I did with all these Marvel movies. When we get into movies like Shang-Chi and stuff like that during COVID, I didn't really go to the theater as much because I was just kind of burnt out on Marvel. And at that point, Disney Plus was a thing, and you knew, 3 to 4 months later, it was just going to end up on Disney Plus. So if you're already paying for the subscription, why go pay $50 at the theater for a movie that's just going to be out in a few months later? Plus, Marvel was kind of a mess right there. And like I said, I was kind of burnt out on Marvel, which is very surprising for me, being the giant Marvel superhero movie nerd that I am. Even I got burnt out on this. But then when COVID ended and we started to get better quality movies like Deadpool and Wolverine, Spider-Man No Way Home, that's when I really jumped back into the theater for Marvel. But this is the one, these early phases are where I went to a Marvel movie every opening weekend that it was. And Thor: The Dark World is no different than that, even though it's not a great movie. I still had a blast watching this in theaters back in 2013. It had a budget of roughly about 170 million. You have to kind of take into account, marketing and advertisements and all that, but this is kind of like the pure production budget was about 170 million. Usually my rule of thumb is whatever this budget says on IMDb or whatever production budget is, double it to kind of take into account the marketing. So you're looking at roughly about 300 million as a total budget for this movie. Worldwide, it looked like it grossed about 644 million. So it pretty much doubled its profit, which is great, but it was poorly received by audiences. So Marvel was kind of like, oh, we need to kind of pivot on the Thor character. Hence why Ragnarok is the way it is. They went a completely different route with Ragnarok, and that's going to be a big talking point in that episode when we finally do Thor Ragnarok. But they really were like, we kind of have to pivot on the Thor character. These movies aren't doing great, even though he's he's a fan favorite character because of Chris Hemsworth's performance. And I absolutely love Chris Hemsworth. So kind of diving into the cast here. All the cast came back. We have a couple of new characters, like the villain, of course, and then Ian, the intern. We'll talk briefly about him. But Chris Hemsworth returns as Thor. This is now his third take on the character after doing the first Thor movie and the Avengers movie. We kind of catch up with him where he is, trying to reconcile the 9 realms after what Loki did in the events of both the Thor movie and the Avengers movie, but mainly the Avengers movie. So he's trying to clean up the mess that Loki started. He's hasn't seen Jane since the first movie, and it's kind of bummed out. He's like focused on just creating peace and prosperity throughout the Nine Realms. He's really molding into that king position that he will be taking once Odin passes as the king of Asgard, and he's really kind of just being this watchful protector of the Nine Realms, kind of like Batman, so to speak, to kind of tie in the DC universe. But he's kind of just in protector mode right now. Speaking of Jane Foster, Natalie Portman, of course, returns once again. She is investigating or exploring this convergence that is happening between the Nine Realms. So what the convergence is, to kind of give you a brief summary of it, you have the Nine Realms. Every so often, they kind of stack on top of each other to create this convergence, and gravity and matter and all that other crap starts to go haywire, as we see towards the end of the movie, where things are getting sucked up into a different world. Gravity is kind of all over the place. So every so often, I can't remember the exact year amount, but it's like quite a long time in between convergences, but they just happen to kind of coincide with this story. And so that's what she's kind of investigating in England. Already talked about Loki a little bit, but Loki, he is now imprisoned on Asgard after what he did in the Avengers, as well as the first Thor movie. So he's locked up in the dungeons. Eventually, Thor has to break him out in order to help avenge their mother's death from Malekith, who is the villain. Malekith is played by Christopher Eccleston. I totally butchered that name, so we're just calling him Christopher. He plays Malekith, the dark elf leader. So the villain in this movie, or the protagonist, or the antagonist, excuse me, of this movie is the dark elves. They're after the Ether, which is the reality Infinity Stone. We kind of get a brief history of the Infinity Stones. We get a little backstory with Ether, where it's different from the other stones because it's more of a liquefied material rather than like a stone. But if you remember Infinity War, it actually ends up becoming a stone so that Thanos can put it into his gauntlet. But it is more liquidy than anything. It causes you to kind of reshape the reality the way you want to, hence why it's called the Reality Stone. And that is what Malekith wants in order to avenge their home world, as well as change the 9 universes into whatever they want, like a god. Now, we'll talk about a little bit more about him in the villain scale segment of today's show, but he is probably the worst written character in the MCU. Looking through all the research for this movie, Christopher really did not like the character. He flat out admitted in interviews and promotional Comic-Cons or promotional events for this movie leading up to it, he took this money he took this film for the money. Like, he didn't care about the character. He didn't really understand the story or bother to even, give a true performance or accurate performance on the Malekith character from the comics. He just wanted the money. He had a terrible time on set. He hated the character. He hated the makeup, the costumes. He didn't understand anything that was going on, and that definitely shows in his performance and the quality that was a villain. So he is definitely the worst villain that we've gotten so far, and probably ever will in the MCU. And I think he was greatly miscast. Like, the villain itself makes sense for this story, but I think he was terrible in it. His performance was awful. He was greatly miscast, like I said, and just poorly written. So that is the villain. So it kind of sets the tone of the movie when the villain is the worst villain in the franchise. And it sucks because this is an important movie. Like, this is the introduction of the Reality Stone, and that's why I do find enjoyment in watching this, even though it's terrible, because you get that origin story of the Reality Stone, which is a huge MacGuffin in Infinity War. So you kind of have to have this movie when you want to rewatch like this entire Infinity Saga, but it just sucks that the writing was just not better. Odin returns with Anthony Hopkins playing him once again. He's kind of sidelined a lot in this movie. He's very angry. You know, he's kind of moody, so to speak, too. It's really, I didn't completely love his portrayal in this one. I absolutely loved him in the first movie. For some reason in the second movie, they just like, let's make Odin a dick and just make him angry. Like, Thor brings Jane to Asgard finally and hopes to help because she has the ether inside of her and she's practically dying from the inside. And Thor's freaking out. So what do? You bring him to your dad because you trust your dad's judgment and the technology they have. And Odin's just a dick. Like, he's just like, yeah, they do have healers on Earth. They're called doctors. You have them deal with it. When Odin can clearly see that this thing is an infinity stone inside of her. But even when he's explaining what the ether was to Thor and Jane and all that, he's really a dick and just really moody. He's a grumpy old man in here. And I don't understand the direction that they gave Anthony Hopkins. Because I thought he was great as Odin in the first movie. But then here they just make him a grumpy old man. I just don't understand it. We get the return of Frigga, who is the mother of Thor and Loki, played by Renee Russo once again. She's great in here. You know, she welcomes Jane into Asgard just like any other mother would when her son brings, you know, his new girlfriend over. She unfortunately ends up dying in here by Malekith and the Dark Elves, and that kind of sparks this unusual companionship with Loki and Thor as they go on this mission to get revenge on their mother's death by killing Malekith and stopping him from unleashing the ether onto the Nine Realms. But yeah, it sucks that Frigga dies, but this is like this genesis of this dark road that Thor goes down throughout the MCU, where eventually Odin dies, Jane and him split up, he ends up losing Heimdall, and just this train of death that follows Thor throughout the MCU. And this is the real big spark that starts it all, is the death of his mother, and he's not the same since. So it sucks that Frigga died, but they kind of needed that little push to get them going. Heimdall returns as well. He's played once again by Idris Elba. He doesn't have a huge part in this one. He's only in a few scenes, but it's great to see Idris Elba return as well. He seems to love the character. So I'll take any amount of Heimdall that I can because I love Idris Elba. We do get the Sif and the Warriors 2 this time. So Sif, played by Jamie Alexander once again. She's great in here. So the Sith and the Warriors, they don't get a whole lot either in here. This is mainly Thor and Loki's story. They kind of get thrown into the side, which I totally get it. There's a lot of characters to juggle, so you don't really need them. They're in the right amount of time that they do. So if I'm going to give any sort of positives about this movie, I think they did handle their screen time correctly, because it's just going to get too bloated with casts at this point. So I think they were in the right amount of time. Volstagg is played by Ray Stevenson once again. And then Fandre, I think that's how you say it. I can never get his name right. But he is actually recast and played as Zachary Levi, because actually Zachary Levi was the original choice for that character. And I think they have that in fun facts. So we'll talk about it a little bit. We'll talk about it again, but Zachary Levi was the first choice from the first Thor movie to play this character, but schedule conflictions with Chuck, the show that he was doing at the time, which definitely check out Chuck. That show is amazing, and Zachary Levi is incredible in there. But he couldn't get away from that set, so he wasn't able to join the MCU at that time. But he finally gets a break in his schedule, and he's able to join the MCU as one of Thor's buddies in here, which he should have been in the first movie. But he was great too. I love his enthusiasm and his cracking jokes and sarcasm in here. I love Zachary Levi. He's fantastic. Darcy Lewis returns as Kat Dennings, who absolutely love Kat Dennings. She's incredible as Darcy. she ends up getting her own intern, Ian the intern, played by Jonathan Howard. They form a interesting partnership together as they travel through England to fight this convergence with Eric Selvig, who also returns, played by Stellan Skarsgård. Now, he has an interesting story in here where he is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs for a lot of the time, where he's studying this convergence as well, but he's going to Stonehenge naked with these metal rods because he's trying to stop the conversions, and it kind of just loses his mind. He ends up getting arrested, thrown in the asylum. That's where we get that great scene with Stan Lee where he's like, "Can I have my shoe back?" as he's using the shoe to explain the convergence. And he gets that great line when he's released that nothing makes you more happier than knowing that the world is crazier than you. But yeah, Eric Selvig's mind kind of got scrambled from the mind control from the Avengers movie, so it makes total sense. But he kind of goes cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs in this movie, running around naked in Stonehenge. So that's kind of wrapping up the cast. It's got quite a bit of a cast, but it's mainly, Thor, Loki, and Malekith in here. But everybody, aside from the villain and Anthony Hopkins, I think everybody does a great job with their performances. It just sucks that the villain which is half the movie, is just bad, just really, really bad. And then you get grumpy old man Odin in here, which I don't like. So let's touch on the director a little bit, because this is a bit of a crazy story. So for those of you that don't know this, Patty Jenkins was actually originally announced as the director for this movie. And when she got supposedly let go or fired or whatever it ended up being, Natalie Portman got publicly upset about this and was why she didn't want to return for Thor Ragnarok. And it took a while for her to return back into the MCU with Thor Love and Thunder. But this really was the end of Natalie Portman's stint with the MCU, because she was so upset about Patty Jenkins not becoming the director, even though they announced it. They ended up going with Alan Taylor, who he himself was unhappy with the studio because he didn't like the final cut of the film. Like, the studio locked him out of the editing room once filming was done, and they just kind of Frankenstein their own version of this. Like, this wasn't Alan Taylor's version of the movie. This is Disney Studios' version of the movie. They just took everything that Alan worked on as far as the filming and the writing and all that, and they just put it together how they wanted to. And as a director, as a creator myself, I would be very frustrated if that's how I was. Like, imagine if you're filming a movie or you're filming a podcast episode and you do all the recording, you do all the filming, and then somebody else comes in and go, "Okay, you can leave. We're going to edit this. We're going to put it together the way we want to. You're not even going to look at it until we put it on the big screen." Like, that has got to be super frustrating. So I don't blame him at all for being very unhappy with the final cut of this film, because this clearly shows you that the studio has no idea what they're doing, because this movie is at the bottom of this franchise. This really shows you that a studio needs to trust in the director that they hire and back their version or their vision of the story that you're trying to tell, because you're the one that hired them. Like, when I read this is Disney Marvel going, "Okay, we need a body just to put a name to the movie, but we're going to do everything. They're just going to be the face of it, and if fans come after us or they don't like the project, we're going to throw Alan Taylor to the crowd. We're going to sacrifice him as the GOAT and tell everybody, like, yeah, that was what he filmed. This is what his project was, so we're not going to bring him back." When in reality, it's the studio that messed up. Pardon my French, but Disney fucked up on this movie hard. And it's a shame, because there is a good movie in here. It's deep, deep, deep inside. Don't get me wrong. Like, this sucker's 1,000 feet underground, buried. But there is a good movie in here somewhere. And the studio freaking screwed this up hard. And it just sucks, because, like I keep saying, this is an important movie, and I make this argument every time when I talk about the MCU. Thor: The Dark World is an important movie when it comes to the Infinity Stone story, because this is the origin of the Ether. We get the backstory of it. We get to see what it can do and what it will do if you unleash it onto the world. And it just sucks that this is the version that we got of it. Now, Thor and the Dark Elves in the comics. Now, I'm not too familiar with Thor comicology. Like, Thor was not a character that I like gravitated towards. Thor was one of my brother's favorites. I was more on the Spider-Man, Captain America, Avengers comics. But I wanted to at least kind of educate myself a little bit on the history of the Dark Elves and Malekith and all that. So apparently these are a race of immortal sadists who've been stealing kids from time, which is crazy that these guys are time traveling kidnappers. So they ruled on the world of Zavartahem. I totally butchered that name. It's one of the 9 worlds of Norse mythology. They were already ancient when magic was young, and then they lived mostly in isolation, almost never making any contact with other races. They ruled at the time by Kra the Uncontrollable. They entered the devastating war with the trolls. Many lives were lost in this war, especially on the Dark Elf side. Then we eventually get into Malekith's rule, where so Malekith the Accursed, which is his full name, I don't think they ever, if they do mention Malekith the Accursed, like his full title, it's probably in that monologue at the beginning of the movie from Odin. But otherwise, they just call him Malekith in this movie. He is the most powerful among their ranks. Was Algrim the Strong. However, he was betrayed by Malekith in the bid to kill Thor. He was dropped into lava though he survived, he was quickly wounded. Yada, yada, yada. So they're kind of a more isolated race. They are part of the 9 realms, though. Looks like Dark Elves possess gifted intellects, as well as superhuman strength, speed, stamina, durability, agility, and reflexes, which we saw in the movie. A lot of them were actually CGI'd because they are superhuman. Some Dark Elves, like Malekith, can use fairy magic to shapeshift, teleport, project energy blast, and so on. Dark Elves are also immortal, which means they live indefinitely, but they can be killed by physical injury. Wait, what? They're also immortal, which means they can die, but they'll live forever. Kind of like the elves in Lord of the Rings, where they live for a long period of time, but you can't kill them. All Dark Elves are vulnerable to the element of iron, especially Asgardian steel, which, surprise, surprise. So yeah, we didn't really get any of that. We didn't get any shape shifting. We didn't get any teleporting. We did get some energy blasts, but those are from the weaponry. We didn't get them from them. I think that would have been really interesting if, like, Malekith was actually shape shifting into beings on Earth, and he like infiltrated Earth as like. Could you imagine if he like shape shifted into like Captain America and like infiltrated the Avengers? Like, that would be freaking wild. Loki does some shape shifting in here because we get that cool scene where he shape shifts into Chris Evans, and we get that short little spat with him. But the fact that we didn't get any of these powers in the movie really sucks, because that would have been really cool to see the Dark Elves like teleport and shit. Like, that would have been awesome. So that kind of gives you a backstory on the comic version of these Dark Elves. So there was this big civil war too, and I guess I'll have to do some more digging on this and actually look up some of these comic books that they were in. But they seem to be actually more badass in the comics than they were in the movie, which kind of sucks. And I like the concept of elves. They're really cool. And then these ones too, are the way they shapeshift and teleport. They probably, knowing the MCU and knowing Disney Marvel, they probably didn't want to introduce that aspect because the Skrulls were probably coming, and they're famous for being shapeshifters in the Marvel universe. So they probably didn't want to kind of double dip there. Same thing with like Miss Marvel, where she stretches too, but they had to change up her powers because they knew Reed Richards was coming into the light, so they didn't want two Avengers with stretchy powers. So I guess I can kind of see that if they're thinking really far ahead to where eventually we're going to do the scrolls. Let's not include the dark elves because they can shift as well. But that's the thing about the Marvel universe as far as the comics go. Like, there's a lot of characters double dipping powers and things like that. So I didn't have an issue. I think that would have been really cool if we would have gotten those superpowers with the dark elves. They were just normal elves in here with red blaster guns. I mean, that's all they were. It was pretty lame. And then Infinity Stone, I've already kind of talked about this already, but this is the introduction of the Reality Stone, or the Ether as it's called. After this movie, they just start calling it the Reality Stone. But it's pretty cool. It's a liquefied stone that can alter the reality as what you want it to. It ends up getting sucked up into Natalie Portman, and it defends itself. If anybody touches her, we get those few scenes there where like the cop was trying to grab her, and it defends itself by blasting him 100 feet in the air. So, but it's a very important movie in the Infinity Saga, because this is where we get the origins of one of the Infinity Stones. So even though it was greatly poorly written, it's still a very important movie in this saga. So let's get into the iconic scenes, favorite quotes, and fun facts. So like I said, I had a kind of a little bit of a difficult time trying to pull these iconic scenes together, because I wanted to pull the good scenes out of here. I didn't want to just spend the entire episode dunking on this movie, even though it's pretty bad. I wanted to pull out the good, because that's what I like to do as a movie watcher, as a podcaster. I want to take the good with the bad, and I don't want it to just be a boring and depressing episode today of just talking the bad stuff, because there is a lot of bad stuff in this movie, but there's also some good stuff. So I want to pull some good stuff out of here. So the first scene I have on here is that flashback, or the prologue of Odin kind of explaining the history of the Dark Elves and the Ether and his father Bor, which was the first to kind of take on Malekith and discover the Ether. And it's really cool. There's some really cool action in here. You get that big war between the Asgardians and the Dark Elves. Bor seems like a pretty badass character, where he's fighting off all these Dark Elves. He fights off Malekith. He ends up getting wounded, and they go into hibernation because the Ether's there, and they bury the Ether, in a different world where nobody can find it, because they can't really destroy it. As we see later on in the MCU, these Infinity Stones are extremely, extremely difficult to destroy. But eventually, Thanos does destroy them at the end of Infinity War. But they have to bury this, and that's kind of where the story leaves off, or starts off, where Natalie Portman's Jane Foster ends up just stumbling across this ancient ruins on a different universe where the Ether is hiding, and she ends up getting sucked into it. The next scene I have is Frigga's death. Now, this is a bummer of a scene, but I really like how they did it. It makes me feel something, I guess, is the best way I can explain it. Like, it's a great performances. It's a great scene to watch. So Frigga is protecting Jane from the Dark Elves as they're attacking Asgard. We get into this room with Malekith there, and he's got that deep voice, which is whatever. Like, I don't like the voice either in here, and I just don't like the performance. But Frigga is a badass. She draws her sword without hesitating. She's ready to fight this dude, and she actually cuts Malekith a little bit, showing that. And then he gets pissed off, and then they end up stabbing her in front of Thor. Thor lightning bolts the shit out of his face, and that forces him to retreat. But it's still a pretty good scene to watch, and I like the performance of Renee Russo in here, and the way she dies in front of Thor. It's a very emotional scene, and it changes the Thor character forever. This is a huge point in his story in the MCU, so wanted to include that. Eric getting arrested at Stonehenge. I love this one because he's, it's still in Skarsgård running around naked at Stonehenge with these freaking experimental poles that he believes will stop the convergence, and it's just funny seeing him on the news cameras running around naked. He's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, as I'm going to call him. That's just a fun little scene there. There's actually a quite a interesting fun fact that we'll get to about the filming at Stonehenge, which I'm surprised they were able to pull that off. That place is like guarded heavily, and they have like such a long list of rules that I hear that you have to follow. But it's pretty amazing that they were able to actually film that short little scene at the actual Stonehenge instead of having to do it on a stage and recreating it. The next scene I have is Thor and Loki tricking Malekith. This is probably my favorite scene of the movie, where they come up with this plan of Loki is handing over Thor to Malekith as kind of a peace offering. Like, all he wants is to watch Malekith destroy Earth. But it ends up revealing that it's a trick. You know, they cut off Thor's hand, which was incredible to watch. I remember that in the trailer. And then Loki using his magic to set up this scene or this lie, and it's really well done. And they end up fighting more of the Dark Elves and Malekith and all that. But it was really cool. The performances with Thor and Loki were very well done by Tom Hiddleston and Chris Hemsworth. I liked how they were able to trick Malekith. They even tricked the audience. Like, I remember seeing this in the theater, and I was like, holy shit. Thor lost a hand, and now we're going to get a one-handed Thor the rest of the universe. But it turns out it was a trick. So that was really cool. And then the final scene I have here is the final battle during the convergence, where it's kind of a ridiculous scene, but I do like the action in here, especially when the stuff that Thor's doing with the hammer is pretty cool. And he ends up destroying Malekith, who sucks up the ether, and he's literally a dark elf. Like, he is all black once the ether goes inside of him. Jane never turned into a dark version of Jane, so I don't know what the hell that's all about. But I still do enjoy. And while that's going on, you get Eric and Darcy and Ian running around with these metal poles trying to stop the convergence, and everything is, gravity is non-existent. So you have cars and trucks and stuff flying all around them, and they're having to dodge all that. So it's still a pretty entertaining scene, even though it's not great. But I wanted to at least include that in the iconic scenes, because that's a scene that I think of when I hear the title Thor: The Dark World. But the one I think the most is either Eric getting arrested at Stonehenge, or Thor and Loki coming up with this plan to trick Malekith into thinking Loki is handing over Thor as a peace offering. Favorite quotes. This isn't a long list. Most of these are Loki's. Well, actually, 2 of them are Loki's. I only have like 5 quotes here because I couldn't think of any other ones. This one from Loki. Oh, this is much better. Costume's a bit much. So tight, but the confidence. I could feel the righteousness surging. Hey, you want to have a rousing discussion about truth, honor, patriotism? God bless her. And then it covers. This is when Loki is dressed up as Chris Evans in Captain America, which I thought was a really fun thing to get a cameo from Chris Evans in here. Then we have another one from Loki. Well done. You just decapitated your grandfather, as they're flying through Asgard, and they end up, when they stole the Dark Elf ship, and they cut off the head of Bor's statue. I love this quote because it's not the only time this happens. I think she mentions it in the first Thor movie as well, but when Darcy calls Thor's hammer Mew Mew instead of Mjolnir, that's pretty funny. Kat Dennings is so adorable. The first ever Stan Lee quote that we haven't had on here, during his cameo, where he asks Eric Selvage, "Can I have my shoe back?" I always think of that quote when I think of this movie. And then we actually have a post-credit scene quote here. And this kind of, when I saw this post-credit scene, and I'm not going to lie, I got some goosebumps when I heard Benicio del Toro, the collector, who we'll meet and talk about more in the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. He is the one that's receiving the ether after they've recaptured it from Malekith. Volstagg and Sif go to the collector's shop, and they hand over the reality stone to him. He goes, 1 down, 5 to go, as hinting that he wants all 6 Infinity Stones for himself, where also Thanos is looking for them as well. So those are your favorite quotes for Thor: The Dark World. It's a very short list. I had a kind of a hard time coming up with those. I do have a long list of fun facts. There's actually some pretty interesting facts here, so I'll go through these. Chris Hemsworth grew out his hair for over a year to make more authentic, to have a more authentic long hair rather than using a wig like he had done in the first Thor movie. Chris Hemsworth also improvised hanging Mjolnir on a coke rat in a polite manner after playing with it between takes. That scene when they go to Eric's place and he hangs up the hammer on the coat hook, that was actually improvised because he's Chris Hemsworth, as everybody else, including myself, would do in between takes. He's playing with the hammer. Thor accidentally destroys a statue of his grandfather, Bor, which we talked about already. And then Loki wisecracks that he killed him. Actually, in the Marvel Comics, Thor ended up killing his grandfather as part of a deception by Loki, which is interesting. Loki was originally not going to appear at all in the film, and there was going to be a much greater focus on Malekith and the Dark Elves. Following his popularity in the Avengers movie, the script was rewritten to give him a big role, which I already mentioned already, but that is interesting that this would have been a completely different movie without Loki, and I think it was a good decision to bring Tom Hiddleston back because he was the main entertainment feature of this movie. Because of the height difference between the two, a box and then later a ramp had to be used in some of the close-up and kissing scenes between Natalie Portman and Chris Hemsworth. Natalie Portman is 5'3", while Hemsworth is 6'3", so a complete foot difference between the two. The scene where Dr. Jane Foster slaps Thor had to be shot several times because Natalie Portman kept fake slapping Chris Hemsworth to avoid hurting him. After about 30 takes, she was slapping him for real. Later on, where Dr. Jane Foster first meets Loki and punches him, Portman actually did hit Tom Hiddleston. This time, though, it only took her 5 takes to get to that point. I'm on the side as a director, as a creative. If you're going to slap or punch somebody on set, just fully commit and do it. It's more authentic that way. Up to 11,000 weapons were used for this movie. A team of up to 20 technicians worked to build new props or transform some of the props from the first Thor movie with more wear and tear on them. 11,000. That is an insane amount of weapons. The shot of the levitating truck was achieved with a large hydraulic rig, which could be programmed to change speed and movement. That's pretty interesting. I always wondered how they were able to get that floating truck to happen when that kid goes into that abandoned building and he just touches a little bit and it floats in there because there's no gravity with the convergence there. Filming at the famous Stonehenge historical site proved to be a challenge. No duh, because it's Stonehenge. After finally getting permission from English Heritage, the filmmakers found out that there were lots of rules and regulations associated with filming there. They could only be in amongst the stones outside of the normal visiting hours, so shooting had to take place early in the morning before opening, which only gave the film crew about 3 hours before they had to pull back for wider shots once the stones were open to the public. Being a heritage site, no one was allowed to touch the stones nor walk on any of them, so a lot of the logistics had to be applied to the filming there. So they actually got the film there, but there was a bunch of rules and regulations that they had to follow, which I totally understand. Like, that is a historical site, and we don't want to tamper that whatsoever. But that's really cool that they were allowed to film there. And then the last fun fact I have here, Jamie Alexander, who plays Sif in the movie, was injured on the London movie set. She recalls it was raining, it was dark outside, it was like 5 a.m, and I went down a metal staircase and slipped a disc in my thoracic spine and chipped 11 of my vertebrae. Holy shit. She got knocked out. Oh no, she says, I knocked my left shoulder out of place and tore my rhomboid on my right side. I'm pretty sure I butchered that name. I'm not a doctor. It took me out of filming for a month, she said. So that happened in September of filming, I believe, of that year that they were filming. So that sucks for her, but eventually she did heal. Good. Glad that she got to heal and come back in the other movies as well as the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show. So that sucks getting injured on set, but I'm glad that she made a recovery and she was able to come back to the Marvel Universe. So that will be the fun facts for today on Thor: The Dark World. So yeah, to kind of wrap things up in a nice little bow, not a great movie, but there's parts of this movie I enjoy. I love the brother buddy cop like style between Loki and Thor. I think that was a great idea to make him a bigger role in here after the success that he had in the Avengers movie as the villain. Malekith, the worst villain in the MCU, I think, as of today, actually, too. It's just poorly written. Performance was bad. You could tell that Christopher was not in it. He only wanted the money. And we'll certainly talk. You can probably guess what the villain scale will be for him, but we will get to that in just a few seconds here with the ranking segment. And I'll reiterate and I'll pound this into the dirt and I'll die on this hill, but this is an important movie in the Infinity Stone saga. Like, if you're going to do some kind of marathon to prep for Infinity Stones, that gets shown in the Infinity War and Endgame movies, you need to watch this. Like, this is a very important movie to get the backstory of the Reality Stone, because we really don't get anything else. I mean, we get a little bit in Infinity War when Thanos finally gets the Infinity Stone, but this is an important movie that sets up that stone, and it just sucks that this wasn't written any better, and the villain wasn't performed or written better either. But this still is a very important movie in the MCU, and definitely you have to watch this in order to have a really good marathon experience for the Infinity Saga. So it just sucks that this wasn't the movie that it could have been, because, like I keep saying, there is a good movie in here somewhere. It's buried 1,000 feet underground, but it is in there. And it should be centered around Loki and Thor, because they're great together. I love the back and forth between Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston, not just in this movie, but into the MCU as a whole. They were perfectly casted. They have a great chemistry together as brothers that want to fight and backstab each other. But they are the ones that really save this movie and make it somewhat watchable. If Loki wasn't in here, this movie would just straight up suck, and it would be at the very bottom of the MCU for sure. But the fact that Loki was brought in here and has a bigger role in here kind of saved the movie, to be honest, and it makes it not as bad as it could have been, but it still is a pretty bad movie. It's one of the worst movies in the MCU, but it's still a very, very important one, because we get that backstory of the Reality Stone and the Infinity Saga. So to wrap things up, let's head over to the rankings for the MCU ranking, the villain scale, and then the popcorn scale. So we'll start off with the MCU ranking for Thor: The Dark World. Like I said, it's towards the bottom of the list. It is at number 47 out of 52 projects. To kind of give you an idea of what's around it and the quality of projects that we're looking at. So we're just going to start at the bottom and we'll work our way up, because it's not that far from the bottom. So at the bottom of the MCU, I have the Eternals as the worst project of the MCU. And we're going to dive into that movie because it is part of the marathon for Marvel Friday, and we're going to talk about it a lot. And I have done an episode already, so go ahead and go. I think it was like the first year I did the podcast. It was one of the movies that I did, but it is the worst. At 51, that's where we have the Marvels, the Captain Marvel sequel. Really terrible movie. Even though I love Kamala Khan as a character, it just is not a good movie. At 50 is where we have Secret Invasion. This was a mini-series on Disney Plus about the Skrull invasion on Earth and Nick Fury tackling that, and it's just a terrible, terrible series. Echo, another mini-series on Disney Plus. This is a kind of a spin-off of Hawkeye with Maya Lopez, who was the antagonist in the Hawkeye series. This is kind of her own side quest as a vigilante, and it's not good. 48, that is where Captain Marvel comes in. This is a terrible movie as well. I don't have a whole lot of good things to say about Captain Marvel. It's 48 for a reason. And then 47, this is where Thor: The Dark World lands. At 46, right above it, Incredible Hulk. 45, She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, the miniseries on Disney Plus. And then 44 is Moon Knight, another series on Disney Plus. Agatha All Along. I was not a fan of that series on Disney Plus. And then The Falcon and the Winter Soldier at 42, miniseries. And you can kind of see a trend here where these shows aren't great. Miss Marvel, not great, but definitely not terrible. I do love the Kamala Khan character, like I said already, but the series as a whole was not great. That's at 41. And then to kind of cap off at 40 is the Ironheart series on Disney Plus. So you can see a trend here where these Disney Plus shows are just not good. And then you have the Marvels, of course, which is only a couple of years old, not good as well. So that is the ranking for Thor: The Dark World. That comes in at number 47 on the list. The villain scale. As a reminder, this is we are ranking the villain of each Marvel show, basing it off of the performance of the actor, the motivation as a villain, and the costume design. Starting with the performance, I've already mentioned it already. You could tell that there was no energy, no effort, no love into this character from the actor Christopher. He clearly, and he admitted this to the public, he only took this job for the money. He did not care about the character. He did not have a fun time on set. The makeup was torture. He said the costume was torture. It's just all bad on the performance department for him. Most of it was on him. It still wasn't great writing, so he didn't have a lot to work with. But he didn't make any effort either on researching the comics for it. So definitely miscasted. So poor performance for sure. The motivation as a villain, it's kind of cookie cutter. He wants this all-powerful device to reshape the world in his image. I mean, it's not reinventing the wheel. It's not creative like, say, Loki is, and it's not, I mean, it's not very entertaining. His motivation, I don't care. Like, it kind of ties into the performance. I didn't believe him as a villain, and it's kind of a throwaway storyline. It's just not good, poorly written. And then the costume. The costume's fine. The device that he sleeps in is a little weird, where he's hooked up to this thing. He's raised off the ground, and he's just sleeping like this, like in the air. And it's like a weird big helmet piece. You'll see it in the artwork on the video here. The device that goes around him, that's how he sleeps and hibernates. Yeah, the look of the Dark Elves, not great. Let me pull up a picture from the comics, see if I can find one here. Dark Elves, Marvel Comics. I'm going to see what they look like. I mean, they do. So the costumes of the Dark Elves are actually pretty accurate to the comics from what I'm seeing. What does Malekith look like in the comics? Let's do that. Malekith. I want to see how different. Yeah, he doesn't look like that at all. I mean, in the comics, he's got the blue skin. He's got the long white hair. Yeah, this isn't even close to what he looks like. Like, why didn't they make them blue like in the comics? Like, no, they really dropped the ball on him. He would have looked much cooler if they would have stuck to the comic for. So yeah, I'm giving it a big fat on the comic, on the costume department. They dropped the ball on that one for sure. So as you could probably guess, I'm giving it one Thanos head because that's just the end of the scale. I don't go to 0. I at least give it 1 to 5, and he's getting a 1. That's as low as we can go on the scale. It's yes, all terrible, all bad vibes on the villain department. Now, finally, the popcorn scale for the Thor: The Dark World. This one was a little tricky on which direction I want to go, but with the Loki and Thor brother chemistry in here, it saves it. So I'm giving it 2 popcorn buckets. I thought about giving it 1, but I think the projects that earn a 1 popcorn bucket on the scale, this is better than those because of the performances from Chris Hemsworth, from Tom Hiddleston, from Rene Russo as Frigga, even Natalie Portman's performance as Jane Foster. I enjoy it. That's what saves it from getting a 1. So I am giving it 2. That's as high as I can go. This is just one of the worst ones in the MCU, unfortunately, and I think giving it 2 popcorn buckets is kind of being generous, so to speak. I could have easily, depending on the day, I could see an argument for 1, but projects like the Marvels and Eternals and what was the other one? Echo. Those are 1 popcorn bucket movies. This one, I can actually get somewhat of an enjoyment out of it. Those ones I just are all bad, start to finish. Thor and Loki saved the movie for me, so I'm giving it 2 popcorn buckets, even though that's very, very generous. So that'll do it for our episode this week for Marvel Friday. Next week, we will do one of my favorite movies. We're finally getting into the top 10. Let me check. This might even be the top 5. It is not top 5, but it is top 10, which is the first top 10 one that we're going to be doing in our Marvel Friday marathon, and that is Captain America, the Winter Soldier. This is the first project that the Russo brothers are attached to, and they end up becoming a staple in the MCU as far as into entertainment, enjoyment, quality of projects that they are getting involved in. So this is the origins of the Russo brothers coming into the MCU, which saves the MCU, if you ask me. I'm going to have a really fun time talking about the Winter Soldier finally. I absolutely love what they did in that movie, and I'm super excited for next week's. Also, we'll be doing the Avatar Fire and Ash review, which will be coming out in the next couple days. Now will cap off 2025 for the show, which means we will kick off the new year with the first annual Cinematic Awards show. It's going to be really fun. I've got a bunch of categories. We're going to be giving out golden clappers to movies like Best in Kids and Family, Best in Horror, Best in Drama or Thriller. We'll also be doing the Best Show and Best Series of the Year. I'll go through my top 5 shows and top 5 movies of the year as well. We'll also be predicting some of the 2026 projects, because there's a lot of films and shows that are highly anticipated for 2026. So I'll kind of give some predictions on what could be possible winners for those categories next year. So a lot of awesome episodes coming out. You can also check out my football podcast, the End Zone Report, every week. We're in the middle of week 17, which is the fantasy playoffs, if you partake in the football fantasy world of the NFL. So a lot of stuff to talk about on the next episode of that show. So if you're a football nut like me, go ahead and check out that. It's the End Zone. You can watch that on YouTube, but you can also watch it on Spotify. So that'll do it for today's episode. I hope you all are enjoying your holiday weekend, and we will see you all next time with Avatar, Fire, and Ash.